I know what you guys might be thinking. Kat, you already made a video about BookTok. I say that as if I have a big following, but yes, I did. That video, however, was unscripted and did not have the arguments I think are most important. I've seen a lot of people defend books that glorify sexual violence. I do not think these books should be labeled as dark romance, as nothing about them are romantic or should be seen as such. I want to make that clear before I continue. I also want to make it clear that I do not think BookTok as a whole is bad, and I understand that a lot of the criticism towards BookTok is misogynistic. However, I do think that books that romanticize sexual violence are not okay. I don't think that romanticizing sexual violence at all is okay. Regardless of whether or not the author is a woman or a man, it's not okay. First off, I've seen a lot of people argue that murder is normalized in fiction, so why not sexual violence? I'm not going to lie to you, this argument irritates me a lot. People use the same argument to justify buying the game No Mercy, a game where you rape as many women as possible to earn points. The first issue with this argument is that rape and murder are absolutely not the same. They are both major crimes, yes, but rape is far more common than murder. As much as you may think that it is still not taken seriously in today's world by the justice system. There are a lot of victims of sexual violence who report it to the police, and yet nothing is done about it. There was recently a man in Belgium who was convicted of rape, but was let free because he has a bright future. Not to mention that the fact that the President of the United States is a convicted criminal and a rapist, but he's still allowed to run the country. Despite this, many people still use the argument of false accusations ruin a man's life to shut down any victim speaking out about what happened to them. Because of this behavior, there are a lot more rapists in the world than we might think. It is also worth noting that the fastest growing prison population in Scotland are sexual predators. Another issue with this argument is that people actually don't like it when you defend murder in fiction. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the show Adolescence. The show is about a teenage boy named Jamie who was rejected by a girl named Katie in his school and so decided to kill her for it. In episode 3, he claims that he is better than the other boys because he didn't touch her sexually without her consent. Some people have defended his actions by saying, well, she bullied him, so she deserved it. Obviously, most people find this argument disgusting. Why are we justifying what he did when he murdered her? I'm not going to go on about this too long, or I'll get sidetracked, but I just thought it was worth pointing out that many people do find it gross when you try to justify murder in fiction. For the sake of it, I also decided to include another example of this. I'm not sure if any of you would know the book series Warrior Cats, but there's a cat named Ashfur in the book who tries to murder a litter of kittens because his crush Squirrelflight rejected him. People have tried to defend this by saying that Squirrelflight shouldn't have because she ended up with another cat named Brambleclaw, who's also quite abusive. They thought that Ashfur would treat her better. Most people also don't agree with this and call people out anytime they try to defend it. Therefore, I think that if there were books where the author tried to justify murder, people would also not find that okay. So this argument just doesn't make any sense at the end of the day, in my opinion. Another argument I've seen people make is that it's just fiction, it doesn't really affect reality. This also irritates me because these books try to justify the abuser's actions with arguments that people try to use to justify rape in real life. It doesn't matter if the abuser is fictional or real, it's not okay to feed into that line of thinking. The problem is that these books are feeding into rape culture, and it's an even bigger issue that they are being sold for money. So the authors are being supported by people who are buying these books. You may say that the people who read these books are old enough to know better, but I highly doubt that. I'm pretty sure most of the people reading these books are actually teenage girls, despite what many people may think. Especially since they are popular on TikTok. TikTok is an app that is used by mostly teenagers. Even so, media literacy is not in a good spot at the moment. We unfortunately cannot rely on people to know better when the writer is trying to spread a narrative that is problematic and defends the abuser's actions in their books. I saw one of these people who defend these books say that people are okay with Lolita, which is also a dark romance book. I'm sorry, but what? Lolita is not a dark romance book. It is not a romance. You're supposed to think that what Humbert is doing is bad. Just because he's the main character does not mean he is the good guy. It's kind of like how some people think that BoJack Horseman is somehow the good guy, when he is very clearly not. I also want to make it clear that I do not think that all mentions of sexual violence in media is bad. That is obviously stupid. I just think that if you're going to include sexual violence in books or movies or any other type of content, it should be handled well and absolutely should not be glorified. That is the main issue here, the glorification. The final argument I've seen that really grinds my gears, specifically because of how many people have fallen for it, is the argument that these books help victims of abuse get past their trauma because it gives them power back by letting them close the book at any time during the assault. Someone has said this to me to try to make me feel bad for criticizing these books before, and while it worked for about a minute, I realized, why the fuck do they need to be sexualizing it then? Why would you specifically need a book that glorifies rape for that? That doesn't make any sense. I did ask them that, and they didn't have an answer. You know why? Because there is none. There's no reason. This argument irritates me a lot, because I feel it is very manipulative, as it's definitely convinced a lot of people who I thought would know better to agree that these books that romanticize rape are somehow harmless. I just think that it's upsetting that people are using this excuse of being a victim to try and justify this and guilt people into shutting up. I've literally had people be like, well, you're not a victim, so you don't know what you're talking about. How do you know I'm not a victim, Tiffany? How do you know that? I'll have you know, and I don't want to say this, but I feel like I have to, but I am actually a victim. That is why I'm so upset. I actually think that a lot of people who are angry about this are victims. I'm never going to forget the amount of people who got so pissed off at Call Me Chris for calling out Book Talk, accusing her of being misogynistic and getting her to take down her video. It irritated me a lot because a lot of people angry at her used this argument when Call Me Chris herself is also a victim. I'm pretty sure she made a video about that before the controversy around her video. My conclusion is that I think anything that glorifies rape or sexual abuse of any kind is bad. I know, shocker. I'm very disappointed by the rise in people trying to justify it. I thought we all knew why this was bad, but apparently not. I'm also put off by how defensive people get over this shit. And I can't help but feel like it's because they themselves know that it is bad. So they try to look for any argument they could possibly think of to manipulate people into feeling bad for calling them out. Anyway, I just wanted to get that off my chest. And if you're respectful, feel free to share your opinions. However, I'm sorry, but I highly doubt they will change my mind.